Waukeen goes to set out the next morning on this journey to find this village where the woman is supposed to know the location of the scroll. As he's preparing to set out, he packs his provisions on Onyx, his horse, and makes sure he has all of his affairs in order, and he sets out. From what he was told by the king and his magical advisor, the journey is supposed to take around 2 days. They don't know exactly where the village is, they just know you need to head east, and you should get to an area where you will be able to identify where the village is. Waukeen is pretty familiar with this area, he grew up, but he doesn't remember any villages off to the east. With that being said, he still decides, this shouldn't be too hard, I should be able to find it with no problem, and he sets out. As Waukeen is going through these fields and he's thinking ahead about all of the things that he's about to encounter, he also thinks about what's the reason that none of these other knights and these other soldiers that have embarked on this quest, why have they never returned? Why hasn't anyone said anything? Why haven't they heard from anyone? And this is the primary thing that he's thinking about. This must be a pretty dangerous quest for him to go on if all of these great knights and soldiers never came back. He doesn't know what to expect. They haven't given him any information about, what may be out there. And so he is dwelling on this. As he's going through the fields, he finally gets to the wall of forest where the trail goes in, and he decides that it's starting to get dark, but he can make some more time. So he goes on in and he travels for a couple more hours, still thinking about everything that he's about to come across. The road that he's on is pretty heavily traveled still. Lots of people just traveling from one place to the other on this road. They all have, carts full of items and things that they need to carry to and from. And he just sees everybody living their lives, and he's just thinking about, what he needs to do next. And before he knows it, it's starting to get dark. So Waukeen pulls off to the side with the Onyx and ties up Onyx, sets up camp, and starts to prepare for the evening. Waukeen sleeps through the night pretty peacefully. Nothing of any noteworthiness happened. Everything was fine. After a good few hours of sleep, he wakes up to birds chirping, the wind whistling through the trees, and he's just peaceful. So he packs up everything onto Onyx and heads back out. As he continues going, it's been a couple of hours at this point, and he gets to where the road starts getting less and less traveled, less and less people, and it kind of hits a fork that he's never really came across before, he's never seen. And this fork looks more like one main road, and then the other road is very hard to tell is a road. Seeing this road fork off the way it is, and with this side being very, very overgrown and rocky and branches all in it, Waukeen kind of gets to a point where he thinks, maybe this is the route I should take. Something is calling him to go that way. Call it intuition, if you will. But he decides, if everyone went this way, but no one knows where the village is, then it's probably not that way. So he decides to go down the less traveled path. And he travels down this path for a few more hours. At this point, it's been many hours since he's woken up and he's taken these trails. And as he's going down this path, it starts to get more and more dense, thicker. And then he starts to realize that he's not really hearing the birds chirping. He's not really hearing the wind rustling through the leaves anymore. And he kind of feels a little uneasy. So he kind of gets a little bit on guard. He starts looking around, kind of puts his hand on his hilt a little bit, waiting for something to jump out at him, waiting for some type of danger to appear. And he keeps riding. Over time, the brush gets even thicker, and the branches seem to come a little bit lower. And it gets to where he really can't even ride on Onyx without running into something, without something getting in his way. So he decides to hop off Onyx, and him and Onyx are just gonna continue down this path together, walking. And as they continue walking and walking, and he hears nothing, no birds, no leaves, no anything, he starts to feel a little bit uneasy again. And this time, as he's walking towards this really dense wall of foliage, he kind of can see through, and he sees something a little bit past it. And he gets to this wall, and he kind of pushes the bushes aside, and as he pushes them aside, a village emerges. He sees a little opening right before you get to the village, but he sees almost like a fence line that goes around this village. It's not very big, it's pretty small. Doesn't see really any roads that go in and out other than the one he's on, but the one he's on is so overgrown, you can barely even call it a road. So he comes up to this village, and he sees this fence line, and he sees like an opening in it where it looks like maybe the road should have gone, but it doesn't. And he goes up through, and he's looking around, and he sees a few buildings, a few houses, cabin-like houses, and he's just trying to get an idea of what it is he's walking into, what kind of village is this. Doesn't see many people walking around, and so he kind of is on guard a little bit. And as he's walking, he kind of starts to feel like there's a lot of eyes on him. Doesn't know who's looking at him, doesn't know where it's coming from necessarily, but he feels like he's being watched. As he enters into this village a little bit more, he sees kind of like just a stand with a top on it, and inside of that stand with a top on it, there's a little bit of a chimney, and there's a furnace, and there's a man working in there, possibly blacksmithing, he doesn't know. But he walks up, and he talks to the gentleman, and he says, I'm looking for a woman. She's supposed to be able to help me find a location. Do you know anyone like that around here? Waukeen was very direct and very upfront, and sometimes it's best to be that way, sometimes it's not. He took a chance. The man was sitting there working with the furnace and with his tools. He kind of pauses, he stops for a second, he puts his head down, and he just lets out a sigh, and then he looks over towards this specific house and just looks over there for a second, and then he goes back to working. Waukeen takes that as that was the answer. He thanks him, and he begins to walk towards the house. As Waukeen gets over to this house, he again feels like he's being watched. He doesn't know who's looking, he doesn't know where it's coming from, but just something is telling him people are looking at him. He just feels eyes on him. He gets up to the door and he knocks. A very young, attractive, beautiful woman answers the door. She's wearing a red dress. She appears to be in her early 20s, dark hair, bright blue eyes. She looks at him and she's like, "Can I help you?" And Waukeen says, "I was sent here to see if you could help me find a scroll. The king sent me." The woman smiles and invites him in. Waukeen was very caught off guard by this. He wasn't expecting a young woman. And they made it sound like this woman's been around for a very long time, that she's got all this knowledge, and he expected a little bit older of a lady. But regardless, she seems to know what he's talking about. So he walks in, of course, still checking the area, making sure everything's okay. He walks in behind her, he closes the door, and she leads him into the main room, where there's furniture around and a table. It's not a very big cabin, but big enough where you can stand comfortably. She goes to the far corner and turns around and looks at him. And as Waukeen was standing there looking at her, waiting for her to say something, he suddenly felt like something was coming up behind him. And about that time, he turns and looks. There's a man lunging towards him, a large man. Some might say he was like a grizzly bear of a man, lunging towards him. Before the man could get to him, Waukeen was able to just punch him square in the face. The man did not expect to be hit that fast, and it caught him off guard and also stopped him in his tracks. Waukeen set back, getting ready to fight, and the man, once stopped in his tracks, decided to continue coming in, and he starts swinging. Waukeen's dodging all of these punches. One punch after another is coming at him. The man is throwing it with all of his force and as fast as he can. Waukeen just moves and moves and moves, and he realizes this man is so large that he can't move fast enough to hit Waukeen. So as he circles the room and the man is continuing to swing at him, he realizes the man's not going to be able to make contact with him with his speed. And once the man starts to tire down, Waukeen begins to unload on this man, just punching him left and right, up and down, just beating the mess out of him around this room. The man's falling backwards, knocking over all of the furniture. Everything's falling down, breaking. And then finally, Waukeen gets him down to the ground. Once the man falls down onto his back, he stands over him and he goes to start hitting the man. Well, as soon as he goes to start hitting the man, the woman calmly, quietly clears her throat and says, "That's enough." Waukeen looks over at her, looks down at the man who's bleeding all over the face, barely even breathing, and he's like, "Okay." And he walks off the man, and the man just lays there, unable to get up, just squirming and holding on to his face. The woman, very calm, is just like, "You understand why I had to do that?" And he looks at her and he's like, "No, I don't understand why you had to do that." And she said, "You're coming here asking to find this scroll that so many others have tried to come and find. If you can't handle fighting Gregory," and she points at Gregory on the floor, "if you can't handle fighting Gregory, then how do you expect to make it on this journey to get this scroll that is one of the most challenging and difficult journeys anyone has ever been on, and full of more danger than anyone can imagine?" And Waukeen just kind of looks at her and he's like, "Okay." The woman kind of smiles at him for a second, and she says, "Most don't beat Gregory. Most don't even come close. If they do beat him, it's barely, and they barely can walk out of here themselves." Waukeen asks, "So did I pass your little test?" And the woman, kind of with a serious face, looks at him and she says, "You understand that what you're wanting to do is very dangerous and almost impossible to obtain. The last thing I need to do is send another unworthy soul out there to collect this scroll for them to fail inevitably and to make it harder for the next person." Waukeen, confused by her words, doesn't understand. How does someone else failing make it harder for me? Waukeen, puzzled by her words, asks her straightforward, "So will you tell me where this scroll is?" The woman takes a sip of her tea, kind of sits back a moment and thinks. And she says, "If ever I felt like someone was worthy of actually being able to find the scroll and actually obtain the scroll, it is now. But this journey is so dangerous in ways that you have never seen before. You will encounter things that you have never known to exist, things you never expect to see." Waukeen, still unshaken, asks her, "So you will tell me?" Again, the woman sits back. She seems to be thinking. Waukeen says, "I've made a vow to find this I need to know where it is. I need to fulfill my vow. And the woman lifts her head up, looks at the ceiling, and she says, strength and honor, is it? And Waukeen says, yes, it is strength and honor. And she's like, I've heard that so many times from so many people, you don't realize what you're getting into. But if you really believe that you can do this, and you think that it's worth all of the travels and all of the dangers to fulfill this vow, that no one would ever question you on if you ever walked away, because they understand the dangers that come with this. But if you feel like you must do this, I will tell you. The woman then gets out a paper and kind of stencils out some type of map onto this paper. And Waukeen walks over and slowly picks up this map that she had drawn out. And he turns to walk off. As he turns to walk off, she stops him and she says, you know, most never made it to this point. Are you sure you still want to do this? And Waukeen looks back at her and he says, well, what happened to all these other people? And she said, well, like I said, most never got past Gregory. Gregory usually beats some sense into them, and either they run off or they decide they still want to try and go. If they've won, some of them still left because they realized that they barely won when they fought against Gregory. But these people that did decide to go, I never heard from again. I don't know whatever happened to them. Waukeen just kind of pauses for a moment and he's like, okay, thank you. And he goes to walk out, and then she stops him and she's like, stop. And he looks back at her. She's like, please stay. Just stay the night, rest, eat, and then you can leave in the morning. And he looks at her confused. Why would I stay here? And he turns to walk towards the door again, and she says, stop, please. It is about to be dark. You don't want to be out there at dark. Outside of this town, there are dangers that you don't want to see, that you don't want to mess with. Just please stay through the night, and then you can leave in the morning. And while he's thinking about it, Gregory sits up from off the floor holding his nose. And he's like, just stay. Don't go out there. Have some sense about you. And he puts his hand up for Waukeen to pick him up. Waukeen thinks about it for a second. He walks over and grabs his hand. He pulls him up. The guy's holding on to his nose, trying not to bleed everywhere. And he's like, okay, that's fine. I'll stay the night with you. That night, as Waukeen laid in the extra bedroom that the woman had in her house, he heard these growling noises and these barking noises that seemed to be coming from outside of the town, but it didn't sound anything like a dog he's ever heard before. Very, very low growls and a barking noise that just didn't sound like a dog that he would recognize. He heard all these sounds outside of the town. And then he started hearing like these shrieking noises. And these shrieking noises did not sound human, didn't sound like an animal either. He didn't know what they were. But he heard these noises, and it wasn't constant or anything, but he just heard them throughout the night. But eventually he was able to go to sleep. And when he woke up the next morning, he got out of the bed. He walked out into the room, didn't see anybody, walked outside and sees the woman cooking eggs outside on the fire. And he watches her for a few seconds, and then he says, hey, I'm sorry, but I never got your name. What was your name? And she looked back and kind of gave him a smirk, and she says, Catherine. He's like, oh, very beautiful name. thank you so much for taking care of me last night and allowing me to stay here, and thank you for what, giving me the map. And he's just very thankful for what she did, and he understands the test that she put him through. And she smiled as she heard him stumbling through his words and thanking her. They went inside, they all ate together, they talked for a bit, and then he went out, he packed up Onyx, and he set out on his journey to find this scroll.